They say you can't outrun your problems, but damn it, I was going to try. Packed my life into my beat-up sedan. Drove until the city smog was a distant memory, replaced by endless stretches of highway, and aimed for the cheapest slice of no where I could find on a map. That turned out to be Harmony Creek. The name alone should have been a red flag, honestly. Places with names like Harmony or Pleasant rarely live up to them, in my experience. But the rent was dirt cheap. A tiny 2-bedroom bungalow advertised online, and cheap was the operative word after everything fell apart back home. Financial ruin has a way of making you less picky about your zip code. Rolling into Harmony Creek felt like driving onto a movie set from the 50s that someone forgot to update. Manicured lawns, identical houses painted in muted pastels, picket fences, the whole 9 yards. It was nestled in a valley, surrounded by dense, dark woods that seemed to press in on all sides, swallowing the afternoon sun earlier than they should have. The silence was the first thing that really hit me. Not quiet, like a peaceful suburb. Silent, like the air itself was holding its breath. No kids playing, no dogs barking, no distant hum of traffic. Just stillness. It was unnerving. I found the address easily enough, a small, pale yellow house identical to its neighbors, distinguished only by the peeling paint on the porch railing. As I pulled into the driveway, the front door opened, and a woman stepped out beaming. She looked like she'd stepped right out of one of those old sitcoms, perfectly coiffed gray floor, print dress, sensible shoes. Ethan Hayes. You must be. She chirped, extending a hand clad in a gardening glove. I'm Martha Gable, from the town council, but everyone just calls me Ms. Gable. We're just so thrilled to have a new face around here. Her enthusiasm felt practiced, a little too bright against the backdrop of the town's oppressive quiet. Nice to meet you, Miss Gable. I managed, shaking her hand. Dirt smudged my palm. No. The landlord asked me to give you the keys and just go over a few little things. Make sure you feel right at home, she said, bustling towards the front door. She produced a single, old-fashioned brass key from her apron pocket. Here we are. It's not much, but it's clean, and the plumbing mostly works. She laughed, a brittle sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. We did a quick walkthrough. The place smelled faintly of dust and lemon polish. Furniture was sparse and dated, but functional. Standard rental fare. Miss Gable pointed out the fuse box. The water shut-off valve told me trash day was Tuesday, recycling Thursday. All perfectly normal. We ended up back on the small front porch. Well, she said, clapping her hands together lightly. That about covers the basics. Grocery stores on Main Street, can't miss it. Post office next door. We don't have much in the way of nightlife, I'm afraid, but it's peaceful. She paused, her smile tightening just a fraction. Oh, and Ethan. Welcome to Harmony Creek. Just one thing we do differently here, a little town quirk, you might say. I waited. Here it comes, I thought. The weird HOA rule. The mandatory lawn gnome, whatever small town peculiarity I'd have to navigate. We don't lock our doors, she said, her voice still bright, almost casual, but with an underlying firmness that sent a weird chill down my spine. Ever. Not house doors, not car doors if they're parked on your property overnight. It's just how we are. Keeps the peace, you know. I stared at her. I'm sorry you don't lock your doors. At all. That's right, she beamed, as if announcing the winner of a raffle. No need. We all look out for each other here. It's about trust. Buck, what about, security? Privacy. My city dweller instincts were screaming. Leaving a door unlocked felt like painting a target on your back. Miss Gable's smile didn't waver, but her eyes seemed distant for a second. Like I said, Ethan, we trust each other. It's a very safe town, you'll see. Besides, she added, her tone shifting slightly, becoming almost conspiratorial, yet still cheerful. It just works out better for everyone this way. Keeps things harmonious. She patted my arm. You'll get used to it in no time. Everyone does. Just leave it unlocked, day and night. Simple as that. Before I could press further, she was wishing me a lovely afternoon and bustling back down the sidewalk towards a house identical to mine 3 doors down. I watched her go, the single brass key feeling heavy and useless in my hand. Don't lock your doors. Ever. It echoed in my head. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a statement. A rule delivered with a smile, but a rule nonetheless. Keeps the peace. What the hell did that even mean? How does leaving yourself vulnerable keep the peace? My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. Maybe crime truly was non-existent here. Some kind of extreme social pact. Or maybe Ms. Gable was just messing with the new guy. But, her eyes, there was something behind that cheerful facade. Something that wasn't cheerful at all. I spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking the few boxes I'd brought, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Every floorboard creak. Every sigh of the wind outside the windows seemed amplified. I kept glancing at the front door, at the deadbolt lock that Miss Gable hadn't even mentioned. It looked sturdy, reassuring. Habit, ingrained over years of city living, urged me to turn it, to feel that satisfying click of security. But her words lingered. Keeps the peace. It just works out better for everyone. There was an unspoken weight to them, a hint of consequence I couldn't decipher, but felt deep in my gut. Was it a threat? A warning? As dusk settled, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange, the woods surrounding the valley seemed to darken, to grow closer. The silence deepened, becoming thick and watchful. I made myself dinner instant ramen. Why? The cuisine of the financially destitute, and ate standing up in the kitchen, my eyes constantly drifting towards the front hall. Night fell completely. The streetlights outside cast long, eerie shadows. I walked to the front door, my hand hovering over the deadbolt. Just turn it, my mind screamed. It's your house. Lock the damn door. Who would even know? But Miss Gable's unwavering smile flashed in my memory. The way the other houses sat, dark and silent. Their doors presumably unlocked in this bizarre pact of vulnerability. It just works out better. For who? With a sigh that felt like defeat, I dropped my hand. I checked that the door was pulled shut. The latch clicked softly into place, but the deadbolt remained untouched. Unlocked. Going to bed felt ridiculous. I was in a strange house, in a strange town, with the front door deliberately left unsecured. Sleep seemed impossible. I lay in the unfamiliar bed in the back room, listening. The house groaned around me, the normal sounds of an old structure settling, probably. But tonight, every noise felt loaded with intent. A branch scraping against the window wasn't just the wind. It was something trying to get in. The furnace kicking on in the basement wasn't just mechanics. It was something stirring below. My focus kept returning to the front door. I pictured it standing there, unlocked, an open invitation in the darkness. To what? Vandals. Burglars. Miss Gable's vague platitudes about trust felt paper thin against the primal urge for security. Hours passed. I drifted in that frustrating state between wakefulness and sleep, my senses on high alert. Sometime deep in the night, maybe around 3 a.m., I heard it. Or thought I heard it. A faint metallic sound from the front of the house. A soft click scrape. Like a key failing to turn. Or like the doorknob itself being gently, slowly turned. I froze, straining my ears. Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. Had I imagined it? The house settling again? My sleep-deprived brain playing tricks. I held my breath, listening so hard my ears hurt. Nothing. No footsteps, no creaking floors. No further sounds from the door. Just the oppressive stillness of Harmony Creek at night. Slowly, cautiously, I got out of bed. The floorboards were cold beneath my bare feet. I crept down the short hallway, my heart pounding against my ribs. The living room was bathed in the weak, gray light filtering through the windows from the street lamp outside. The front door was exactly as I'd left it. Closed. The deadbolt still stubbornly, unnervingly unlocked. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, the wood grain seeming to shift in the low light. Was I losing my mind already? Was the stress of the move, the isolation, the sheer weirdness of the town's one single rule getting to me after less than 12 hours? Maybe. Probably. But as I finally turned to go to bed, a sliver of doubt remained, cold and sharp. The feeling of being watched. The unsettling weight of that unlocked door. Standing sentinel in the dark felt less like trust and more like waiting. Waiting for something I couldn't comprehend. Something invited in by the simple, terrifying absence of a lock. The piece of Harmony Creek felt fragile, thin like ice over dark water. And I was standing right in the middle of it. I woke up stiff, tangled in the thin blanket, the morning light filtering weakly through the blinds. My first conscious thought was the door. I hadn't locked it. Why? The memory of the faint click scrape sound from the night rushed back, making my skin prickle despite the stuffy warmth of the room. Had it been real? A dream? The house settling? Or had someone actually tried the knob? Pushing aside the Eunice, I forced myself out of bed. A quick check confirmed the front door was still closed, the deadbolt untouched. Nothing seemed disturbed inside the house. No muddy footprints, no signs of entry. Relief ward with a lingering paranoia. Maybe I was just stressed. New place, weird rule, isolation, it was probably getting to me. I needed to get out. Get some air. Maybe see if the town felt any less creepy in broad daylight. After a quick shower and choking down a stale granola bar, I stepped outside. The morning was bright, almost painfully so after the gloom of the house. The sky was a clear, sharp blue. But the silence, it was still there. Thick, heavy, unnatural. The manicured lawns looked almost too perfect, the pastel houses like rows of identical, vacant stairs. A few people were out, an elderly man, meticulously trimming his hedges with hand shears. A woman watering flowers that already looked impossibly vibrant. They both looked up as I walked past, offering tight, brief smiles that didn't reach their eyes before quickly looking away again. No waves. No friendly good mornings. Just acknowledgement, followed by swift dismissal. I headed towards Main Street, hoping the grocery store Ms. Gable mentioned would offer some semblance of normalcy. Main Street wasn't much, a single block with a handful of storefronts. The promised grocery store, a Harmony Provisions, sat next to the post office. Its windows were clean, displaying pyramids of unnaturally shiny apples. Pushing open the door, I was met with the chime of a small bell and the scent of floor wax and something vaguely sweet, like overripe fruit. The interior was dimly lit. Shelves stocked neatly but not abundantly. An older man with thinning gray hair and a stained white apron stood behind the counter, polishing the already gleaming surface with a rag. He looked up as I entered, his expression neutral, almost bored. "Morning," I offered, trying for casual. "Morning," he replied, his voice flat. He didn't ask if I needed help, didn't smile. Just watched me with pale, uninterested eyes as I wandered the narrow aisles. The selection was basic canned goods, dusty boxes of cereal, a small refrigerated section with milk and eggs. Everything looked slightly faded, like it had been sitting there for a long time. I grabbed a carton of milk. Checking the expiration date, it was fine. Thankfully, avoiding at least one potential small town horror trope. A loaf of bread and some coffee. As I approached the counter, the silence in the store felt suffocating. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerators and the rhythmic squeak of the man's rag against the counter. "Just this," I said, placing my items down. He rang them up without a word, his movements economical and precise. The total came out surprisingly cheap. As I handed him the cash, I decided to try again, needing some kind of normal interaction. "Just moved into town," I said. "Place on Elm Street. Seems quiet here." He paused his counting, his eyes flicking up to meet mine for a fraction of a second. "It is." "Yeah." I pressed on, feeling awkward. "AEM's Gable from the council mentioned Theusatu, the door thing. About not locking them." The man's hand stilled over the cash register drawer. He didn't look at me, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the counter. "Ems Gable tells everyone. It's the rule." His voice was low, barely audible. "Right, the rule," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Just seems a bit unusual, you know. Coming from the city. He finally looked up. And for a moment, the boredom in his eyes was replaced by something else. Something that looked unnervingly like fear, quickly masked. It's how we keep things peaceful. He recited, the words sounding hollow, rehearsed. Almost identical to Miss Gable's phrasing. You don't lock your doors. Nobody does. You'll get used to it. He shoved my change across the counter, his gaze dropping back down. Have a good day. Dismissal, clear and final. I mumbled a thanks and hurried out, the bell chiming mockingly behind me. The brief flash of fear in the grocer's eyes had been unmistakable. This wasn't just a quirky town tradition. People were genuinely afraid not to follow this rule. But afraid of what? Each other. Something else entirely. Keeps the peace. The phrase echoed in my head, sounding more sinister each time I heard it. What kind of peace needed to be maintained by universal vulnerability? Walking back towards Elm Street, I felt more eyes on me than before. Curtains twitched in windows. The hedge trimming man paused his work to watch me pass, his expression unreadable. The woman watering flowers turned her back pointedly as I approached. It wasn't overt hostility, but a pervasive sense of being observed, judged, and silently warned. Stay in line, don't cause trouble. Don't lock your door. Back in the suffocating silence of my rented bungalow, the unlocked front door seemed to loom larger than ever. It felt like a gaping vulnerability, a symbol of my forced compliance with this town's unsettling pact. I spent the afternoon trying to distract myself, setting up my laptop, attempting to find a decent Wi-Fi signal. Spotty at best. But my thoughts kept circling back to the rule, to the fear in the grocer's eyes, to the sound I might have heard last night. Paranoia gnawed at me. Was I imagining the weird vibes? Was I projecting my own anxieties onto this place? Or was Harmony Creek genuinely hiding something dark beneath its placid surface? The woods surrounding the town felt closer today, darker, their shadows stretching long fingers towards the houses as the afternoon wore on. As evening approached, the familiar dread began to creep back in. The setting sun painted the identical houses in hues of orange and blood red. Streetlights flickered on, we casting pools of sickly yellow light onto the empty sidewalks. The silence deepened, becoming absolute. Dinner was another lonely affair, peanut butter sandwich and the milk I'd bought. I ate quickly, feeling exposed even inside the house. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside sounded like an approaching threat. When night truly fell, why, the thought of leaving the door unlocked again felt almost physically painful. My hand hovered over the deadbolt, the cool metal a tempting promise of security. At just one click.
That's all it takes.
Who would know? But the grocer's fearful eyes, Miss Gable's brittle smile, the weight of the town's collective unspoken agreement pressed down on me. It just works out better for everyone. The implication hung heavy in the air, better for everyone else, perhaps. If I didn't rock the boat, what happened to people who did lock their doors? The question sent a cold dread through me. Was the rule enforced? And how? With a sigh that tasted like resignation, I left the lock untouched. I tried to read, but the words blurred on the page. I tried to watch something on my laptop, but the flickering screen felt inadequate against the oppressive darkness outside. Eventually, I retreated to the bedroom, leaving the hallway light on, a pathetic concession to my fear. Lying in bed, sleep felt even further away than the night before. I strained my ears, listening for any sound beyond the house's normal grounds. The silence outside was absolute. No cars, no distant sirens, no crickets, no wind. Just nothing. It was the kind of silence that feels like it's listening back. Hours crawled by. 2 o'clock. My eyes burned with fatigue, but my mind wouldn't shut off. Then, just as I was starting to drift into a restless doze, I heard it again. Click, scrape. Louder this time. Sharper. Unmistakably coming from the front door. My heart leaped into my throat. I sat bolt upright in bed, frozen, straining to hear. Silence. Then, creak. The slow, deliberate sound of the front door opening. I wasn't imagining it. Someone, or something, was opening my unlocked door. My breath hitched. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Footsteps. No, not exactly. More like a soft, shuffling sound on the hardwood floor in the hallway. Slow, hesitant. Getting closer. My mind screamed at me to do something, hide, grab something heavy, yell, but terror held me paralyzed. The shuffling stopped right outside my bedroom door. I could hear faint breathing, slow and raspy, just on the other side of the thin wooden panel. Time stretched, each second an eternity. I stared at the doorknob, expecting it to turn, waiting for the door to swing open and reveal whatever had let itself in my house. The breathing continued, a low, wet sound that scraped against the silence. Then, as suddenly as it began, the breathing stopped. The shuffling sound resumed, moving away from my door, back down the hallway. I heard the soft thud of the front door closing, followed by the faint click of the latch. And then, silence. Absolute, terrifying silence returned. I sat there for what felt like hours, trembling, drenched in cold sweat. Whoever, or whatever it was, had come inside. It had walked down the hall, stood right outside my bedroom door, listened to me breathing, and thing left. Why? What did it want? Was this the reason for the rule? Was this the hue piece they were keeping? Letting something wander freely through their homes at night. The unlocked door wasn't just a quirky rule anymore. It was an invitation. And last night, something had accepted it. Sleep didn't come back after the shuffling visitor left. How could it? I spent the remaining hours until dawn huddled under the thin blanket, every nerve screaming. Why? My eyes fixed on the bedroom door. The silence that followed the creature's departure was somehow worse than the sounds it had made. It was a heavy, expectant silence, as if the entire town, the house itself, was waiting to see what I would do, waiting for me to break. When the first gray light of morning finally seeped through the blinds, it felt less like a reprieve, and more like the curtain rising on another act of this waking nightmare. My body ached with tension, my mouth tasted like old pennies, and the adrenaline hangover left me shaky and nauseous. But the fear was sharper, colder now. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. Something, had been inside. It had stood right outside my door. With trembling legs, I forced myself out of bed. The floorboards felt treacherous beneath my feet, each step a potential announcement. I crept into the hallway, half expecting to find I don't know what. Muddy footprints. A calling card. Some sign of the violation. But there was nothing. The hallway was empty. The front door was closed, the latch secure, the deadbolt still terrifyingly, unlocked. I scanned the living room, the kitchen. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. No chairs overturned, no drawers rifled through. No obvious trace of the nocturnal intruder. It was maddening. The lack of evidence made me question my own sanity again. Despite the visceral certainty of what I'd heard, the shuffling, the breathing, the creak of the door, it was real. But why? Why come in, stand outside my door, and then just leave? Was it a warning? A test? Or was this just normal for Harmony Creek? Was this the peace they talked about, nightly visitations from some unknown entity, tolerated in exchange for what? Safety from something worse. The thought sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. I needed coffee. Badly. And maybe something stronger. But mostly, I needed answers. The grocer had been a dead end, his fear palpable but uniformative. Miss Gable, the smiling councilwoman, felt like the official mouthpiece, programmed to deliver platitudes and enforce the rule. Who else was there? As I nursed a cup of instant coffee, staring out the kitchen window at the unnervingly perfect lawn next door, I saw movement. A teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, was struggling with a lawnmower. He looked thin, pale, with lank brown hair falling into his eyes. Unlike the other residents I'd seen, he wasn't meticulously tending his yard. He was attacking it, yanking the mower cord with frustrated jerks, kicking the tires when it wouldn't start. He looked angry, and maybe scared. Impulse took over. Before I could second-guess myself, I was out the back door and walking across my lawn towards him. He looked up as I approached, his eyes widening slightly before settling into a sullen, guarded expression. He stopped wrestling with the mower. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, friendly. "Having trouble with that thing?" He shrugged, kicking at a wheel again. "Piece of junk." His voice was low, mumbled. "Yeah, they can be tricky," I offered. "I'm Ethan the Way. Just moved in next door." I gestured towards my house. He glanced at my house, then back at me, suspicion clouding his face. "Yeah, heard someone moved in." He didn't offer his name. "Look," I said, lowering my voice slightly, deciding to take a risk. "This town gets a bit different. That rule about the doorst." He flinched, physically recoiling as if I'd struck him. His head snapped up, eyes wide with genuine panic. "Don't," he hissed, glancing frantically towards his own house, then back at me. "Don't talk about it. Not out here." "But last night," I pressed, keeping my voice low but urgent. Someone came into my house. I heard them." The boy's face went sheet white. He looked utterly terrified. "Shut up." He whispered fiercely, dropping the mower handle. You want to get us both in trouble. Just do what they say. Leave the doors unlocked. Don't ask questions. Don't talk about it. Ever. Just don't. He grabbed the mower handle again, turned his back on me abruptly, and gave the cord a savage yank. Miraculously, the engine sputtered to life with a deafening roar, drowning out any possibility of further conversation. He didn't look back. I retreated to my own yard, my heart pounding. His reaction was more telling than any explanation could have been. The sheer terror in his eyes confirmed it. The rule wasn't just a suggestion. And the nightly occurrences weren't my imagination. There were consequences for talking about it. Consequences severe enough to terrify a teenage boy into silence. Get us both in trouble. Trouble with who? Ms. Gable? The town council? Or the thing that shuffled down hallways in the dead of night? The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety. The encounter with the boy had solidified my fear, but offered no clarity. I felt trapped. We soon discovered why. Leaving Harmony Creek seemed like the only sane option, but the practicalities were daunting. I'd sunk the last of my savings into the deposit and first month's rent. Driving away meant being homeless, penniless, with no prospects. Besides, a darker thought began to take root. What if leaving wasn't allowed? What if the rule, and whatever enforced it, extended beyond the town limits for those who knew about it? I spent hours pacing the small house, jumping at every sound. The silence outside felt heavier than ever, charged with unspoken threats. I kept glancing at the woods that bordered the town. Their dark, dense trees seeming to watch me, waiting. Were the woods the source of the town's fear? Was the creature from the woods? I remembered the way Ms. Gable had mentioned the woods almost dismissively, focusing instead on the town's harmony. As dusk began to settle, the familiar dread returned, amplified tenfold. The thought of another night, another unlocked door, another potential visit, was almost unbearable. I found myself staring at the deadbolt again. The urge to twist it, to feel that solid think of security, almost overwhelming. What would happen if I did? Would alarms blare? Would Miss Gable appear instantly at my door with her terrifying smile? Would the shuffling thing outside my bedroom door suddenly turn violent? The boy's panicked warning echoed in my earsoul. Don't talk about it. Don't ask questions. Locking the door felt like the ultimate question. A direct challenge to the town's enforced peace. My hand trembled as I reached for the lock. My fingers brushed the cool metal. Click. The sound, small as it was, seemed to reverberate through the silent house. I'd done it. I'd locked the deadbolt. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of intense fear. I'd broken the one rule. The only rule. What now? I retreated from the door, backing away into the living room, my eyes fixed on it as if expecting it to burst inwards. Nothing happened. The house remained silent. Outside, the streetlights hummed, casting their sickly glow. The pastel houses across the street sat dark and still. Maybe it was okay. Maybe the rule was just psychological. Discovered why. A way to keep people compliant, fear and suggestion. Maybe nothing actually happened if you locked it. I spent the next few hours in a state of hypervigilance, perched on the edge of the worn sofa, straining to hear any unusual sound. The normal creaks and groans of the old house seemed magnified, each one potentially sinister. I kept the lights on, needing the illusion of safety they provided. Midnight passed. 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock. Silence. Deep, unnerving silence, but no shuffling, no breathing outside my door. Maybe locking it worked. Maybe the creature, whatever it was, only visited houses that followed the rule, houses that offered an invitation. A sliver of hope began to dawn. Then, around 2:30 am, I heard it. Not the shuffling this time. Not the breathing. A soft, rhythmic tapping. It came from the back of the house, from my bedroom window. Tap, 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 slow, deliberate, persistent. Like a fingernail on glass. My blood ran cold. I froze, listening. The tapping continued, steady, unhurried. It wasn't a branch, the night was still, windless. It was intentional. Slowly, heart hammering against my ribs, I rose from the sofa. I crept towards the hallway. Towards the back bedroom. The tapping didn't stop. Tap, 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 I reached the bedroom doorway and peered inside. The room was dark. Why? Lit only by the faint moonlight filtering through the window. The tapping was louder here, clearly coming from the window pane. Tap, 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 I forced myself to move closer, drawn by a morbid curiosity that outweighed my terror. Step by slow step, I approached the window. The tapping paused as I got nearer. Holding my breath, I leaned towards the glass, trying to peer out into the darkness of the backyard. At first, I saw nothing but the reflection of my own terrified face in the dark pane. Then, something shifted in the reflection. A shape behind me in the room. I spun around, a cry catching in my throat. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light from the hallway, was a figure. Tall, unnaturally thin. Its limbs seemingly too long. Its head tilted at an impossible angle. It wasn't shuffling. It wasn't breathing raspily. It was just standing there, watching me. And from its direction, though no mouth seemed to move in the shadowy form, a low whisper slithered across the room, dry and ancient, carrying the scent of dust and decay. You locked the door. You, the whisper, dry as autumn leaves skittering across pavement, hung in the airless room. It wasn't just sound, it felt like a physical weight pressing against my eardrums, vibrating deep within my bones. Terror, cold and absolute, clamped down on my lungs, stealing breath. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, could only stare at the impossible silhouette dominating the doorway. It was tall. Yes, but thin didn't capture it. It was stretched, elongated, like a shadow pulled taut until it threatened to snap. Its limbs seemed jointed wrong, bending at unnatural angles. The head tilted impossibly far to one side, a dark, featureless shape against the dim hallway light. It didn't seem solid. More like a tear in the fabric of the room, a patch of deeper darkness that absorbed the light around it. And it felt ancient, radiating a chilling stillness that spoke of centuries spent waiting in the dark. My eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, a weapon, anything. The window behind me, could I break it? Jump. The fall wasn't that far, maybe 10 feet to the overgrown backyard. But could I move? My legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot. The figure shifted. It wasn't a step, more like a flowing movement. It glided forward into the room, silent as dust settling. The temperature plummeted, the air growing heavy and stale, thick, with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and vaguely rotten, like old blood. You broke the peace. The whisper came again, closer now, seeming to emanate from the air directly in front of my face. Though the figure itself remained several feet away, its lack of discernible features was somehow worse than any monstrous visage could have been. It was a void, an absence given form. My survival instinct finally kicked in, overriding the paralysis. With a choked gasp, I lunged sideways, scrambling away from the figure, towards the wall opposite the window. My shoulder hit the plaster hard, the impact jarring me. I pressed myself flat against the cool surface, trying to make myself smaller. The figure didn't rush. It turned its tilted head slowly, tracking my movement. It felt like being watched by an insect, cold and emotionless. It raised one of its impossibly long arms, the limb unfolding like a carpenter's ruler. The hand, if you call it that, was a cluster of long, twig-like fingers that ended in sharp points. It didn't reach for me. Instead, it drifted towards the front of the house, towards the locked door. The door. It whispered, the sound like dry reeds rubbing together. It stays open. It lets the peace flow. What peace? The peace of nightly intrusions. The peace of living in constant, low-grade terror. The peace of letting this thing wander freely. Get out! I finally managed to croak, the words tearing at my raw throat. Get out of my house! The figure paused, its hand hovering in the air. It tilted its head slightly further, an almost curious gesture that was utterly terrifying. Then, it retracted its arm and turned back towards me, gliding closer. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, coalescing around it, extending from it like tendrils. I realized then that locking the door hadn't just summoned it, it had trapped it. Or perhaps, trapped me with it. The unlocked doors weren't just an invitation. They were a necessary conduit, a way for whatever this was to pass through, to move on. By locking the door, I had disrupted the flow, created a blockage. And now, the pressure was building. It was only feet away now. I could feel the unnatural cold radiating from it, leaching the warmth from my skin. The smell of decay intensified. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for, I didn't know what. Pain, oblivion. Nothing happened. No touch, no attack. Just the crushing weight of its presence, the suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. Slowly, hesitantly, I opened my eyes. The figure was still there, impossibly close. But it wasn't looking at me anymore. Its featureless head was tilted towards the bedroom door, the one leading back to the hallway. And I heard it again, the sound that had started this nightmare. Scrape. From the other side of the bedroom door. My blood turned to ice water. There was something else. The shuffling thing from the previous night. Was that what the figure was waiting for? Then came a soft, rhythmic thump. Thump. Thump against the bedroom door. Not frantic, but heavy, deliberate. Like something dense and solid bumping against the wood. The tall figure beside me shifted again, a low sound vibrating from it, like stones grinding together. It wasn't a sound of aggression, but anticipation. Recognition. The thumping stopped. A faint scratching sound replaced it, moving up the door, as if something was trying to find the knob. This was it. I was trapped between two horrors. The silent, watchful figure beside me, and whatever was trying to get in. With a surge of desperate adrenaline, I shoved myself away from the wall and bolted towards the window. I didn't care about the fall, didn't care about broken bones. Anything was better than being caught between these things. I slammed into the window frame, fumbling with the latch. It was old, stiff. My fingers slipped on the metal. Behind me, I heard the bedroom doorknob begin to turn, slowly, agonizingly. The tall figure remained motionless, a silent observer to my panic. The latch finally gave. I shoved the window upwards, the wood groaning in protest. Cool night air hit my face. Carrying the scent of damp leaves and pine, the smell of the woods that encircled the town. Freedom was right there. I swung one leg over the sill, ready to throw myself out into the darkness. And then I saw them. Standing in the backyard, just beyond the reach of the weak moonlight, filtering through the trees, were figures. Dozens of them. Pale, indistinct shapes, perfectly still, their heads all tilted slightly, watching the house. Watching my window. They looked unnervingly like the figure inside, only smaller, less defined. An audience. Or a welcoming committee. My breath hitched. There was no escape out there either. The woods weren't empty. They were waiting. A soft click sounded behind me as the bedroom door swung open. I froze, half in, half out of the window. I couldn't bring myself to turn around, couldn't bear to see what had entered the room. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The figures in the yard remained motionless, watchful. The tall entity beside me hadn't moved. Then, a new sound. Soft, shuffling footsteps moving across the bedroom floor. Coming towards the window. Towards me. I closed my eyes, a single tear tracing a cold path down my cheek. This was the peace of Harmony Creek. Not an absence of conflict, but a surrender to it. A quiet acceptance of the things that moved in the night. The things that required open doors and silent compliance. Locking the door hadn't protected me. It had merely changed the nature of the intrusion. It had forced a confrontation that the town, in its silent, terrified wisdom, had learned to avoid. The shuffling stopped right behind me. I felt a presence, different from the tall figure's cold stillness. This felt heavy, resigned. I felt a faint puff of air against the back of my neck, carrying the scent of dust and old fabric. Slowly, deliberately, a hand rested gently on my shoulder. It wasn't cold like the tall figure. It felt surprisingly warm. Almost human, but dry, papery. It didn't push, didn't pull. Just rested there. A gesture that felt less like a threat and more like an invitation, an acceptance. Join the peace. The thought wasn't mine, but it echoed in the hollow space where my fear had been. I opened my eyes. The figures in the yard hadn't moved. The woods waited. Inside the room, the tall figure stood like a sentinel. The hand remained on my shoulder. Slowly, I pulled my leg back in from the windowsill. I lowered the window, the old wood groaning softly. I turned the latch, securing it. Then I turned around. The shuffling thing was indistinct in the dim light. Vaguely human-shaped but stooped, wrapped in layers that obscured its form. It offered no threat. Beside it, the tall figure seemed to recede slightly, its edges blurring. I walked past them, out of the bedroom, down the hallway. My footsteps felt heavy on the floorboards. I reached the front door. My hand went to the deadbolt I had defiantly locked hours earlier. With a soft click, I turned it. Unlocked. I opened the door wide, letting the cool night air flood the house, letting the peace flow. I don't know how long I stood there, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the streetlights. Eventually, the shuffling sounded from the back room. The oppressive presence of the tall figure dissipated, leaving only the lingering scent of earth and decay. Morning came. The sun rose over the identical houses, casting long shadows from the oppressive woods. I stood on my porch, watching the light creep across the manicured lawns. The silence felt different today. Not menacing but settled. Expected. Miss Gable walked by, tending her roses. She looked up and gave me her bright, brittle smile. This time, I smiled back. A slow, tired curve of the lips. My eyes felt heavy, distant. "Getting settled in, Ethan," she chirped. "Yes, Miss Gable," I replied, my voice sounding flat, unfamiliar even to myself. "Just finding the harmony." She nodded, satisfied. "Good. It's a peaceful place, isn't it? Once you understand the rules." I nodded, looking out at the quiet street, the silent houses, the dark woods. The unlocked door behind me felt normal now. Necessary. You can't outrun your problems. And sometimes you can't lock them out either. Sometimes. The only way to find peace is to open the door and let them in. To become part of the silence. Part of the harmony.